Hello. Um, this is American History Notes. I'm going to discuss some things about American history. We'll get more into, recorded history, but right now we're talking about people's guesses and speculations and assumptions about history in America, the part of the continent that is United States of America, before Columbus. So before the Spanish, basically. So today we're going to talk about the possibility of other cultures visiting this place before the Spanish arrived. Now, I did read an article. It was a few years back. It was a Courier Journal of Louisville, Kentucky, in May 14, 2006. Had a title that was really kind of stood out. It said, "Archaeological theory would upend history," and it talked about an archaeologist. Well, actually, he had been a pre-med graduate from the University of Iowa, um, and Jim Michael, and he began studying in 1986 um, for some archaeology, and he had photographed some strange etchings or petroglyphs in Kentucky and other states, and he sent them to Harvard University researcher Barry Fell, and he what it was is these were inscriptions um, that of a certain script writing, and he the part of the article I'm quoting here, during a program in Louisville featuring slides of some of the inscriptions of mostly vertical lines and markings, he learned from a fellow presenter that a team of British researchers had been looking for epigraphers, those who study ancient inscriptions, to share information on sites in the Ohio Valley. He sent them photographs of some of the inscriptions he'd seen, and he quoted, I'm quoting, he said, they just looked at them and sent them right back and said, "This is our Colbran alphabet." So Colbran, believed by many to be ancient Welsh or Druid alphabet, is one of the links that Michael believes will help conclusively prove that immigrants from ancient Britain inhabited much of the Ohio Valley and other regions of North America in the 6th century, hundreds of years before Columbus landed in the Americas. Now, professional archaeologists, they acknowledge that there's evidence that some Europeans might have visited the New World before Columbus, but the whole idea of there's a Welsh Indian theory that's been circulating since the 18th century, and there's just not enough evidence to warrant making that a conclusion. But it is very attractive, theory, and these inscriptions are important, and you just they need to be studied, but there isn't enough evidence to make a conclusion. So there's other stories tell of how at Los Lunas, New Mexico, they found inscriptions on rocks that are said to be reproduction of the Ten Commandments, and in Hebrew, dated from 500 to 2,000 years old. Of course, this is highly disputed, um, suggesting that Hebrews landed in North America. And one of the most famous scholars and really articulate on pre-Columbian visitations from Europe and other places is Barry Fell. Now, he died in 1994, but he wrote a book which I have called America BC, Ancient Settlers in the New World. It's very controversial, but he believes that scholars have deciphered inscriptions found all over Americas, uh, what was called the New World by European explorers. And he talks about how ancient ships visited North America, left behind records of colonies by Celts, Basque, Libyans, and even Egyptians. And these inscriptions occur on buried temples, on tablets, and on gravestones, he says, as well as cliff faces. Another book, 1491, New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus, by journalist Charles Mann, makes the case that the continent was very populous in comparison to what we've always thought, with towns and cities in North and South America, well, mostly South America, that were larger than many in Europe. Um, and there was only a very limited, most people in North America are considered to have been hunters and gatherers. So much of what we know or think we know about America's past comes from our interpretation of archaeological evidence and from our evaluation of earlier stories and legends. But what do we do with Celtic inscriptions, Hebrew writing, and the remains of giants up to 12 foot tall in certain burials, if they exist, what their people are saying? Well, just like in the rest of the world, we have to understand that for the scientist who tries to discover these things, there is little evidence. Most of it remains buried, and much speculation. The scientist who studies things that defy the scientific method. In other words, he can experiment on them under controlled conditions, observe, make a record of his observations, and pass them on to other scientists to repeat his efforts and come up with the same conclusions, is forced simply by the nature of human endeavor and thinking to come up with some conclusion, to not only examine evidence, but no matter how little the evidence, to reach some point where he says, that means this. As a Bible believer, I have found in the clear statements of the Bible to explain how mankind reached every part of the earth after the great flood, which destroyed the earth and formed the geography that we now know. First, the civilization before the great flood of Noah was highly advanced with agriculture and husbandry, music and brass and ironworking. Legends concerning the greatness of that civilization can be found in stories of Atlantis, Mu, and in the South Asian Indian religious epics, the Vedas, among other places. So read Genesis 4. Read the whole thing. But not only was this civilization advanced far beyond what we can imagine, because, excuse me, as the great historical writer Will Durant said, most of the evidence of history is still buried, but it was hopelessly corrupted behaviorally and genetically, as we know from the Bible, tainted by the intrusion of supernatural beings, which ruined the character and quality of this creation, man and beast. So read Genesis 6, the chapter 6. And after the great flood, the entire world was populated from 3 families. Read Genesis chapter 9. There are many different theories by theologians and the Bible commentators about who exactly the ancestors of the future inhabitants of North America were. But most conclude that it was either Ham, whose descendants we know of as also inhabiting Africa, even founding ancient Egypt and Babylon, and Shem, the father of all Semitic peoples of the ancient Near East. In any event, if you believe the Bible record, all of the migration to the Americas resulted from the events found in the first few chapters of Genesis, and then future migrations, waves of migrations. In addition to the theory that humans arrived on the American continent via Beringia, a scientific term for the area of the land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, there are other theories of human migration from west to east as a result of transoceanic voyages, and even less popular theories mentioned earlier of migration by sea from Europe and Africa. The archaeological evidence is contradictory, and authorities do not agree on which was the primary method of immigration. They could all have been true to some extent as mankind moved out from the center in what is now called the Middle East. It is, and we're going to discuss this a little further with a CNN article from a couple decades ago that I thought was really interesting, but not today. So I look forward to continuing later, talking to you later. Thank you. Hope you had a good time. I did. Like I say, I'm not picking a stand. I'm just pointing out some things that people talk about, kind of make you think. Take care.